And we'll make a start. So nice and easy. I've had several people over the last few days teaching come up to me and say, you know, I've done something to my X, Y, or Z. It's not at all unusual. And I know a couple of people commented in this class and that. It's not at all unusual at this time of year. January, February time, combination of feeling a bit chilly out there, maybe a bit tired, you know, it's not the most energetic time of year. It's quite easy just to kind of, you know, curl up in a chair or in bed and then get up and reach out for something on the shelf and suddenly you don't even realize that you're doing it. So as I've said before, one of the things that we start to do in Tai Chi is make this little assessment. You know, how am I doing, as it were? And in the process of doing that, also thinking about your basic posture, how you're moving, and how you're moving with that sense of self-assessment. So overall, the posture in Tai Chi, postures that we take, and this is the most basic one of all, standing postures, should create a sense of space for movement. Both external movement, you know, you're turning your hips and your arms are swinging around, and also a sense of movement within your body. And we do that by lining ourselves up with the pull of gravity. So there's a minimum of resistance to gravity and a minimum of tightening up as a result of that resistance. So from the side, we're looking for a reasonably straight posture, or a reasonably upright posture, I should say. As I've said a number of times, there aren't any straight lines in your body, but what we can do is imagine the straight line, like the pole there. It doesn't exist, but it's not a bad image to have. An idea that you're somehow sort of swinging around that pole. There's obviously some individual variation in all of that, but it is possible with all human beings to make generalizations about, you know, body proportion and so on and so forth. Within that generalization, there's a lot of variations, but we're structurally fairly similar, unless you've got a particular kind of injury or condition that says that something is very different. So in general terms, you want your weight slightly more forwards in your feet. And some of you may have a sense for the point that we refer to as the bubbling well, or the rising spring, depends how you translate it, which is this acupuncture point in the sole of your foot, just behind the ball of the foot. So if this was my foot, that would be the ball of the foot, and the bubbling well is just behind there on the midline of the foot. Think of that as being the kind of focal point for your weight that you're gradually going to move towards. And that slight angling forwards encourages, in the hips in particular, the sense of just dropping down. So sense of hanging in your hips, buttocks and pelvis. Sometimes say to people, it's a bit like if you were sitting on a fence and your hips and buttocks were hanging over that fence, and then to get a sense of just dropping down. The difference being, if you're on a fence, you'd want to really angle forwards, otherwise you'd fall backwards. So this little bit of dropping down encourages the first stage of our weight dropping. And when you do that, just check your knees in particular, ankles too, but I think it's most obvious in the knees, that often the first thing that happens is the knees really tighten up. And you might want to alter your posture a bit, or you might just want to focus your attention on one knee and think, can you position the knee, move it around a little bit, forwards and backwards, or just very slight movements until I can find a position where it feels quite soft, quite relaxed. And then you try that with the other knee. And you're going to have to repeat that process over and over again to get to a point where you can go into that. I spent ages thinking, oh yeah, got that knee nice, and I think about the other one, or I think about something else to do with the exercise, and next time I registered the knee, it would tighten up again. It's just the old habits that come in, but gradually this sense of releasing around the knees, so that your weight flows down. When you start to feel it in the calf muscles and your feet, it's an indication that you created the opening for that movement downwards in your knees. And just go easy with that. Remember that you can't expect, if you're back like this and you try and relax your knees, you're just going to fall over. If the knees have gone too far forwards, and that they're not going to relax. So we have to think about the physical alignment of the body. So this offers us this possibility of a very free, loose movement around hips, waist, and lower back. And that movement just beginning to transmit itself into every other part of your body. Shoulders nice and loose, arms quite heavy. And then bringing in an image like standing in water up to shoulder height. So you're trying to draw your arms around, move your shoulders in water. An image that offers the possibility of just enough resistance to ensure that your body has to begin to change how it moves. And that's really all we do. This is not you doing that and then thinking, well, I need to do this. If the image of being in water doesn't help, then you get a similar feeling. If you were standing in a moderate wind, not one that was blowing you over, but the resistance of the wind and things like that, those kind of ideas. In a way, you want to feel that somebody's moving you very gently, rather than you having to put a lot of effort into it. And then just turning your hands palm forwards and slowly, as you're turning, raising your arms. See, they're angled out from my shoulders a little bit, elbows hanging down, hands no higher than your shoulders, maybe not even that high, mine aren't that high today. Make sure when you do this, you're not kind of tensing in your back. If you are, just lower your hands down, maybe draw them in a little bit more. Just open up your fingers. So be aware of the spaces between your fingers, your thumb and fingers. And then just let your hands drop down. Standing for a moment and begin to just roll your weight forwards and backwards a little. The range of movement that you can make without having to stiffen up will be somewhere in the region of towards the balls of your feet on the one side and the front part of your heel as you go back. So not at all a big movement in the sole of the foot. But again, if I show you with the pole there, if I tilt the pole from side to side, at the bottom it's not moving very far at all. But if you look at my hand at the top, it's moving a lot further. So there's probably some mathematical formula that will tell you exactly what the differential is. But just recognize that without you having to do anything else other than maintain a good posture, your whole body is moving, and as you move up your body, there is simply going to be more movement there. And this is a principle that we keep coming back to in Tai Chi. And if you just bring your hands out to your sides, you can ease forwards here and just see how the hands swing through. Hips go back, shoulders go back, hands follow, fingers follow. So the tips of your fingers are now moving quite a considerable distance. You'll find after a while that as you go forwards, for instance, I'm exaggerating, notice how the chest is open, the hands comes through, and then if you can just sort of feel your sternum drawing back, the hands seem to go forwards a little bit more, and then going back. And then it's the same thing with the spine. So it's like your upper body is doing this. Where my fingers meet is where the sternum and the spine is. Your upper body is doing that, like a pair of folding doors. And that helps to project your arms forwards and backwards just a little bit more. And that's a very minimal movement. I mean, I was very much exaggerating. It's one that you can feel but don't really see that well. So we get even more movement in the hands and the fingers. So the upshot of this is, in order to move our arms and our hands, we don't actually have to move any part of the body that much. And it's the combination of these little movements that encourage the flow of energy and encourage and build up into the bigger movements. One of the instructions or one of the ideas in one of the old writers in Tai Chi says it much more simply. It says 4 ounces will move 1,000 pounds. Of course, it's got to be the right 4 ounces in the right place and so on. So, for instance, I'm saying about kind of how we can tighten up at this time. If it's your shoulders and it's like, oh, this is a bit difficult, then don't move the shoulders. Try and feel what else is going on in your body. And then just letting yourself come to rest. Now your hips drop back, hands curve under, cradle the ball, and push up. And sing. A few years ago, when I managed to pull a muscle somewhere, I think it was in my right shoulder, one of those annoying injuries. It wasn't a serious injury, but it was very annoying. Every time I moved, it hurt. Especially, it kind of woke me up a couple of times in the night and that kind of thing. So when I went outside to train in Tai Chi, feeling a bit sorry for myself. First of all, I made sure I stayed very loose in the warm-up. And then I started doing dragon plucks the stars from the sky and just focused on those internal movements. I found that if I did that, and if I moved very carefully and didn't try to move too much, I was able to move my arm without any pain at all. So that's not always going to work as well as that. But for any particular movement that you're making, be aware of those areas of stiffness, of tightness, of blockage. And try and work out what is moving them. So If you're a bit stiff in your lower back, for instance, then what is moving your lower back is your legs. So you don't have to put the effort into the lower back. And when you sink down, what's moving the lower back is the pull of gravity. So try not to, it's natural for us if we have an injury to kind of go, oh, you've got to protect it. But remember, when you tighten around that injury or that stiffness, you're actually blocking the movement there. See how far you can take an idea like that without reintroducing the straining. And always very carefully. And then changing. So for instance, one description of pain in Chinese medicine, one way of sort of describing the energetic quality is that it's knotted energy. So if you went to put your shoes on and there was a knot in the shoelace, you wouldn't kind of like pull and snap at it. You would ease it out very gently. So we can begin to manage these things from day to day, very carefully. Remembering the overall aim is to really, or one of the overall aims, I should say, is to really sort of like encourage that flow of movement within the body. And changing now to parting the clouds. There may be some exercises, if it is your shoulders, for instance, maybe some exercises that you simply won't want to do, which is fine. Always pacing yourself. And really, whether or not we have a stiff shoulder or whatever it is, this is what we should always be doing, especially in the first few minutes of a session, start of the day, whatever. Body expanding and contracting, that rhythm, that flow that comes with it, the resonance that comes with it can be a good way also of just beginning to move a bit more smoothly, a bit more freely. Now this time, changing to dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Do one more on each side. Try and be as accurate as possible, as precise as possible in your movements. Keeping that awareness of what you're doing without it becoming rigid. So pushing in 4 directions, but just the first and the last of these. The hands don't go up or out very far with this exercise. They're just pushing out to the sides. So a couple of things about this, and this is what I mean about being accurate with movements. First of all, when we do this, don't do this, don't lean back. It's actually a very common problem. I don't know quite why we do it, but keep that upright positioning as much as possible. And one of the consequences of that is that we feel this very smooth massaging quality of movement up and down the back and across the back. The second thing that's related to that is keeping your hands slightly in front of your shoulders. So here, you see, the hands are actually further forwards there, so that they're kind of in front of the head. Here, when I push out to the side, there's my shoulder. My little finger is the one more or less in line with my ear, not my thumb. The upward movement is a little bit further forwards again. You know, imagine that you were trying to hold something up, say with that top movement, and it was resting on the palms of your hands. Like this, it would direct the force into your body. Like this, it would push you over. So then next time, we're going to add the turning movement. And it's very important that we move properly from our hips, not by twisting up the shoulders. So again, just build this up in stages for the first time. Push out to the side. When your hands get there, just turn a little bit in your hips. You notice my whole body's turning. I'm not doing this or just bringing the arms back there. And I go back to the front and bring my hand in. Then I push out again and I turn. The whole of the torso turning and then back. Bring my hands in. And then with the fourth movement, push out to the sides. So being aware of this area, the center of your body, lower dantian between hips and waist, as the part of the body that's going to direct everything else, in particular your arms. So here as we do this, your hands are still pushing out to the sideways, little finger still in line with your ear, and so on and so forth. Still your weight a little bit forwards, soften your knees, hips dropping back, pelvis hanging from the tail of the spine. So that nice sense of space within your body, allowing for the movement. So the quality of the movement becomes something that can indicate a sense of flow for us. And when we get that flowing movement, that in itself is an indication that we're doing something right. So the reverse is also true. When the movement becomes difficult, you think, oh, then it's always a good idea to go back to checking your posture, whether you're doing the movement correctly. It may just be, and again, particularly if you're a bit stiff somewhere, but it might not be a good movement for you. There's always limits, but it's always worth checking. Am I doing this? Have I stiffened up in the knee or something like that? Am I moving too far? One more time. and then push out. The other thing to think about in terms of managing, if you like, think of it like that, some kind of blockage or a sore spot, is don't just ignore it. It's often said, oh, you just need to relax in that area, but fine if you can, but if you can't, then maybe it's an indication that you shouldn't be doing that movement at the moment. And above all else, don't just grin and bear it. Pain is not there to be pushed through. Now here, once again, add in the turn. It doesn't have to be painful. It could just be a little bit of tightness, a little bit of sense that you're not moving too well. Don't get too obsessive about focusing on these, though. Change to the other side. Sometimes really all it needs is just a little bit of patience, moving correctly, doing the exercises, and things can loosen up. But just remain aware of what's going on. As we go through the different exercises, we want the sense of movement, the energy, to really fill up every available space, every part of the body. And then add in the turn. Interestingly, the thing that helps that most, especially when we're talking about, if you like, distant parts of the body, is that sense of strength and connection that comes from the image of moving through water. Because it's that strength and connection that ultimately will move the energy for you. Now, sinking down, pushing up, arms just following your shoulders, hips going back, very, very gently. As you drop down again, just wait until your pelvis has leveled itself off and then beginning again. Look for a nice, smooth, flowing feeling through your back and your spine with this one. And then similarly, as we go into polishing the table, hands in front of you, turning, push your hips back, swing around. And then, so the focus of your attention here, then the other direction. My hips going around, moving my shoulders, moving my arms. Remember, those of you remember me saying it, heard me saying it, you have a back as well as a front to your body. So here, we're really focusing on that rear part, again, hips, lower back, buttocks. They're the parts of the body doing the moving. Your arms and your shoulders and your head are simply being moved by them. one more in each direction. And then just once again swing it around. And shake out. Another thing that helps is to sort of spread the movement through the body is this process of visualizing, imagining the movement. So once we've got a sense for what that means for you know, this quality that comes from things like moving through water, then we can begin to engage body and mind together to help to produce that. One of the reasons I'm so fond of the exercise bear play that we're about to do is that it really does have that quality of movement to it in spades. It's a little bit kind of loose in its posture, which I think is quite helpful. But paying particular attention to hips, to spine and back. Let's build up bear play again. So just have your hands in front of your shoulders, and then just sinking down and pushing up. So it's worth really thinking about the things that are going to build into bear play. What are the component parts? And this is one part that very similar to when we do rooting down and the wild goose, but you'll see why the hands are in there. And then from here, push up. And just bring the elbows forwards. So if I do this from the side, if I exaggerate, see how I've pushed my sternum forwards, and then I draw it back to there. Now I've gone way too far. I'm throwing the upright quality of my back out in the upper back, but that's the sort of movement. So you've got this movement through your shoulders, courtesy of your hips rising and falling, the chest and upper back opening and closing. And then this time, turn to your left and feel your movement taking your weight into the right foot. At this point, you can't really see, but my elbow is pointing directly down at the knee. On the other side, there. And now you can begin to feel that rolling movement in your hip, with the effect in your rib cage in the middle of your back. And then finally you bring the hand out, pressing down like the bear's paw. Notice that here, come a bit closer, my fingers are going forward, but my body's turned to the side. So that area there where my shoulder meets the torso is opened out a little bit. And two things about that. One is the opening and closing there are very much part of the mechanism of the whole exercise, moving the arms. The second thing is that this helps to just open up the chest and lungs a little bit. It's a bear play. I'll be rolling, smooth, but quite strong movement that in many ways encapsulates much of what we're trying to achieve in these exercises. But without a doubt, you will find that you're really pushing at the edges of this posture. I'm prepared to take my shoulder quite a long way out of line, my hip, without straining. I'm not fighting against my own body. I'm prepared to let the hip really kind of swing out on this one. You're not trying to do anything other than this exercise. So you wouldn't want to do this walking along the road. If you walk along the road and did did this, you'd either get into a fight or fall over, or possibly both, sort of thing. You wouldn't try and stand on one leg like this, and so on and so forth. But what we do get is this lovely sense of movement within the body. And in particular, I feel with bear play, back and spine are very engaged. And they're often not easy to recognize in these arts. Okay, and then shake out. Now 1 foot forwards. Get your stance right, keep the feet hip width apart, about the same in length, or maybe a little bit long if you can let your hips drop down. Now we are being more precise, shoulder in line with hip, none of this kind of rolling around or anything like that. But looking for that same quality of movement within the body, imagining that same quality of movement in, say, your spine, the back. And I emphasize spine and back because I think it's often overlooked. You know, I've quoted it many times, rooted in the feet, released in the legs, controlled in the center, and expressed in the arms. But actually, if you think about it, there's a huge chunk of the body that is missing from that formula. It feels like it needs another lining to do with the back somehow, back and spine. So imagine if going back to the exercise swaying in the river, it's the same kind of thing. A minimum amount of effort here pushes up like a little wave flowing into your spine. And that movement just building to push you forward, and then the same thing going back. A much more compact, economical movement than the last one. You're going to 60% of your weight in the front leg, and then when you go back, 70%, until you start raising toes and heel. Maybe less than that. So what I really should say is a maximum of 60% at this stage. And then sink back, raise your front toes a little bit. You'll find a little bit more of your weight goes back. You turn the front foot out, that helps get more weight down into the hip as your back heel rises. And then stepping in. When you do, bring the leg in. Just for a moment while it's in the air, if it's in the air. See if you can just feel the weight of your leg pulling down on your hip. And shake out. Just as an aside, before we carry on, let me just get something. I'm going to need to demonstrate this. So, a little exercise you can try very carefully. If you've got somewhere with a step that you can where you can hold on, or you can do something like this. Got a couple of foam blocks there. When I stand on that, notice that I'm next to the wall. I can just let my leg hang down, and then I can really feel the weight of the leg hanging down. I don't have to sort of hold it up, and then you can just let the leg swing. This is a really good way to release your hips and to get the sense of movement in your leg. You could do it without the blocks, but then your foot would keep hitting the ground. It's just a very simple swinging movement. And it's a good way of, again, getting a sense for the movement that we look for. You know, when we do this, oops, when you do it right, we don't want just kind of stiffen up. We want that same sense. All you've really done is rotate the knee. And here, ideally, you will feel the same weight of the leg hanging from your hip. And so this movement becomes a very loose swinging type movement in the way. I mean, it's a great exercise anyway, just to get the legs energized. But say stand on a step if you've got somewhere to hold on to. Obviously be careful, but it's a useful exercise, that one. So now just same on the other side. Feet hip width apart, front toes pointing forwards at this stage. If you can make the adjustments so that your shoulders and your hips face forwards without putting a strain on the back knee or on your spine and back and shoulders, and do so. Really the key to this is to let go in your hips, because this movement from here to here is almost purely in your hips. And the other thing that will happen is you'll probably almost certainly get a bit of a pull in of the back knee, and at the same time as you do that, you push the back knee out just a little bit. You won't be able to maintain that straight away. You may be able to do it, but you won't be able to keep doing it. So after a couple of rounds of this, you'll probably find it more comfortable to go back to just that angle in the body. And as always, just build this up slowly and gently. And above all, remember that quality of movement that we felt in bear play. Can you still feel within the body? You won't see it from outside, but can you feel that working inside your body, that sense of flow, the energy, quite strong, but also with a soft quality to it. So then, toes and heels beginning to rise just a little bit. And then stepping in. And then step through. And go back the other way. Oops. That will happen sometimes. So this too helps with the flow of the movement, I think. Because when you take a step, you're no longer sort of straining to kind of try and lift the leg. It does work the muscles around here, the hips and the buttocks again. Just there, that movement. They tend to be underused. So again, it takes a while to condition that. Okay, right foot forwards. Sink your weight back. Just rotate your hands so the palms are facing forwards. And then move forwards and rotate. So bird folds its wings. This is quite a small movement, but it involves again that opening and closing in chest and upper back. So once again, we can begin to feel those currents of movement, currents of energy within the body. And the softness of the movement and if you like, the distribution of the effort really enables that sense of the energy flowing everywhere. Hips sinking down, pelvis hanging. Aware of that line from your shoulders to your hips. And then from here, once again, using the image of moving through water, move back, feel your hands held back for a moment, and then flowing through. Very similar to the first exercise that we did, swaying in the river. Same thing going forwards. So if I exaggerate, I do this happens, it's like somebody has hold of my fingers, then they release them, my arms follow. Same thing here, it's like somebody's pulling my hands back gently, and then they release, and that lets my hands swing through. That's a little bit exaggerated again. You see, it's a smoother movement. But ideally, just as your hands are reaching the end of the forwards movement, your hips begin to move back. And just as your hands reach the end of the rear movement, your hips begin to move forwards. This exercise reminds me that I used to be able to get kind of executive toys. They would have you put one on the mantelpiece or something like that, and they'd tilt from one side to another, and this coloured liquid would flow through them. A bit like a lava lamp, but without the bubbles, I suppose you could say. And it's got some of that kind of quality to it, wave-like quality, I think. It's really just a case of getting away from the idea that your hands are the kind of main part of the movement. They express the movement. Now going into pushing a wave. Still it's true of the hands, but there's a little bit more shape and purpose. We're pushing into something, pushing a boat out or something. The movement comes from underneath. It's like if you're out for a walk and with somebody and they're trying to climb a wall or something, and you're giving them a little push up. It's like you're getting underneath them and just pushing up, that kind of thing. So these last three movements have all been done facing forwards. Now you sink back, turn to your right, and as you turn, you feel your shoulders moving slightly differently, and that moves your elbows and then the hands, and you're into wind blows the willows. Go forwards, turn the opposite way, and the same thing happens. Remember, the movement in the center of your body doesn't have to be very big. And as always, where are the parts of your body that are working well, where you can feel the movement? Where are the parts of the body where maybe there's a little bit of blockage there? Can you almost imagine the flow from one area to another? Good, and then bring your feet parallel. Shake out. Good, now have your other foot forwards. And start with bird folds its wings. Once more. And then fisherman castanet. Elbows, wrists, the joints of your fingers, just slightly curved and soft. That will help the arms to just swing out, the movement to flow through your fingers without you having to force it. And then pushing away. And the hips dropping back. Drawing your chin in just a little bit to get that slight sense of a lift through the back of your head. One more time, and then sink back and turn towards the front foot if you get confused by left and right, which often happens. And then when you arrive in the front leg, it's like you're turning away from the foot. One more time. Shake out. When we do the tapping exercises, it's another good way of actually releasing some areas. You know, it comes from Chinese massage, and you will sometimes use chopping movements. So, for instance, if I had a stiff arm, I might choose, you know, so I've got my hand quite cupped there, I can do that. If I wanted something a bit harder, I can do that. We even have a technique in Chinese massage where we hold the fingers together like this, and you target particular points. That's quite painful actually in some areas. They call it bird pecking. So you can focus on particular points, and sometimes the faster movements after the slower movements just kind of loosen some of those areas. So it doesn't have to be particularly hard, but sometimes it's the rhythm of the movement that does it. So rubbing your hands together. I generally start with the pads of my fingers on the face. Obviously your face is quite soft, so you don't want to go at all hard, but covering as much of your face as possible. When I go over my head and neck, I tend to use the palm of the hand cupped, but you might want to use your hands fisted if you're feeling particularly tired, for instance. And then again, usually my hand cupped on the shoulder and arm. On the other side. You want to feel that big muscles on your arms are being just a little bit moved. On the back, I use my hands fisted, but very light. So it's the side of the hand. And going around the hips again, palm of the hand, but you can also use the fist, but I quite like the palm there. The legs, palm of the hand or fist, and of all the parts of the body, your legs would take the most strength. The big muscles of the legs really benefit from strong movement. Light on your belly. Again, quite a sort of delicate part of the body. The chest is very much the upper part of the chest, perhaps especially for women, but I think for men as well. And so it's that just up there, kind of over the thyroid gland. I generally have my hands fisted there. But you could do it there. But you could even use that bird pecking movement there. There's very much these big pectoral muscles there that you're affecting. So that too can be a way of just releasing an area. Quite often in massage, we would alternate between sort of like faster, stronger movements, and then softer movements, and then faster movements. And the combination can help to release tension and tightness in an area. Not always, it depends. So weight forwards a little bit, hips dropping back, and just sinking down, and then embrace tiger, return to mountain. Just giving yourself a chance to come back to the basic posture, and not just the posture technically, but the feeling of just settling. Remember, I said right at the beginning, almost like you're just sitting on top of a fence, and you were, hips and buttocks would be overhanging slightly. The difference being you wouldn't want to lean forward as you would do on a fence. You don't need to, because actually that sense of overhanging allows the pelvis to adjust. Whereas straddling a fence is a bit more difficult. And then just come standing, let your arms hang down by your sides. Like your legs, your arms should be quite heavy. And just take a couple of slow, gentle breaths to finish. Shake out. Lovely. That's great. Thank you as always, everybody. So hope that was useful to you.